Hi, everyone. Welcome, and thanks for joining us for Stars of Franchising.
Get ready for a roller coaster ride through the world of franchising as we bring you the best stories of inspiration and entrepreneurial grit and turning dreams into franchise realities.
That's right, Vinny. From emerging to global brands, we'll chat with the genius minds behind the magic. All brought to you by the Tariq Farid Franchise Institute at Babson College. I'm Ab.
And I'm Vini. Now, buckle up for some serious inspiration.
We're here to welcome Annie Tselikis here from Cousins Maine Lobster. Really excited for our conversation today. Welcome, Annie.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Well, we're really grateful for your participation and love to hear a little bit of your story. We like to, on our podcast and with our guests, start with your why and what calls you to do what you do. So maybe a little history and your why, Annie. Take it away.
Sure. I I've never taken a linear path to do anything in my life. And I've always really just enjoyed experiences and meeting people and having fun in doing something that is valuable for me and valuable for the community. And I can say that pretty easily looking back now, but I would certainly say that coming out of college, for your students that are listening, or if you have, people that are listening who are trying to think about what they want to do next
Right.
or make career moves. It didn't always feel easy, but looking back, it kind of looks a little more strategic than it felt as I was going through the process. I studied anthropology and photography as an undergrad, and I'm from Maine originally. I went to school in Connecticut. And when I came back to Maine after I graduated, I just wanted to have one last summer living and working in Maine before I made any big decisions about what I wanted to do after school. And I happened to work for the ferry service in
Hmm.
Portland, Maine as a deckhand that summer after I graduated. And I loved being on the water. I loved the marine environment. I loved the marine community. I loved the industry. Portland has several year-round island communities off the coast of the city here, and a number of those islands are still fishing communities.
Hmm.
And so one thing led to another, and I just really loved being surrounded by people that worked on the water. And I stayed on the ferry for a couple of years, and then I couldn't figure out how to get off the boat, and I applied for a pre-professional program through an organization here in Maine called the Island Institute,
Hmm.
and they place young people into island and coastal communities up and down the coast of Maine. The communities identify a project or a program that they want to work on, an area of support that they need. And then they bring in people who have recently graduated from their undergrad or their master's programs and match them, kind of like Peace Corps. So it's a dual match process. Match you based on your interest and your background. And I got placed in Stonington, Maine, which just so happens to be our number one lobster fishing port in the
Wow.
state. And the
Didn't know
rest
that.
was kind of history.
Yeah. Hmm.
So I've been working in the lobster industry since I was in my early 20s. I moved there to work with the economic development committee in the town and with an arts nonprofit, and quickly started working with a group of commercial fishermen in the community, and I loved it. I've done a lot of different things in the lobster industry and in the seafood business in Maine. I've worked with groups of commercial fishermen for a number of years before moving over to the supply side of the business. I was always really interested in where lobsters were going around the world.
Hmm.
At the time that I started working in the industry, after years and years of sustainable fisheries management, this industry was just really producing a lot of lobster. And with those additional landings of lobster, the businesses in the supply chain had to find more homes and valuable homes for the product. And a lot of that was in the export space.
Hmm.
And I love to travel. And so I thought, well, if I work on the business side of the industry, there's probably an opportunity for me to
Right.
get to places like Hong Kong or Dubai or
Right.
Paris. And one thing led to another. I ran a trade association for lobster wholesalers and processors for a number of years. And in that period of time, also worked for a lobster exporter. And I did have the opportunity to travel all around the world and promote this product. And have a lot of fun, meeting new people, seeing how lobster is consumed, and how in a variety of different markets, the way that you consume lobster in Singapore is very different than the way that you consume lobster here in the United States of America. Different cultures and traditions, different flavor palettes, and flavor profiles for the product. It was a lot of fun. And in the midst of that, it was probably I'd been in the industry for about 6 or 7 years when my brother and my cousin told our family that they were starting a lobster food truck in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And I told them they were crazy
That's right.
because we'd had a million lobster rolls in our day, and a lot of them were not good.
Yeah.
And
Right.
Jim and Sabin had this incredible experience. Jim went out to visit our cousin Sabin. Jim is my brother, and went out to visit Sabin one weekend, and they had a great time together. They had reconnected after we all went away to college and kind of lost touch, and they had a lot of fun out there. They went out to dinner and started spitballing and telling stories, and they remembered our childhoods of getting our family together around the coast of Maine, and having everybody around and having lobster dinners or going out to different lobster shacks. And one thing led to another, and Cousins Maine Lobster was born. But I told them that they were crazy, and I wasn't the only one.
Yeah. Why was that?
I mean, there were a lot of people that told them they were crazy for a lot of different reasons, that startups won't work, that family business is a failure, that, like you guys don't know anything about food. Like there were a million people that went to them and said, you have no idea what you're doing, which I think happens to a lot of small business owners and entrepreneurs. And it's a good thing that they were smarter than the rest of us and persevered, because what they've built is an incredible business. I joined Cousins Maine Lobster a couple of years ago, and I do a variety of different things, ranging from marketing and franchise sales to government relations, communications. We still really function as a small business. We've got a really small corporate team, and we support a franchise system of we're getting close to about 65 to 70 units right now. We just opened 2 additional corporate units, one in a brand new market. We opened in Salt Lake City last week. We put a second corporate truck in Nashville. We've got internal and external franchise growth in our system, and it's a pretty exciting time. We've really hit our stride with our food trucks, and I think we've gotten there with our restaurants, but it's been a process on both. I mean, we've been learning as we've been growing, and we've been lucky to have some incredible advisors and friends in the process, and it's been a lot of fun working together.
So, Annie, thank you. I want to take you back to the comment that you and many other people out there said to Sabin and Jim, this whole idea that you're crazy. In your own case, what did you see for you to say they are crazy? I guess you're saying that from your experience. You had been in the industry for a while.
Yeah. So having been in the lobster industry for a while, I know this business is hard. Like any small business is hard. The lobster industry is really, really challenging. It's super competitive. It's the pricing can be really volatile on the product, which makes it challenging to run a business if you're not doing everything you can to control all of the different aspects and different levels of your business. If you're not paying attention to the cost of your goods, you can really, really get thrown pretty easily. And if you're not careful about your procurement strategy, it can really mess up your business in about a 6-month to a year span, based on how pricing can change from year to year, or over quarters or halves of year. But I really, when they came to us and said that they were planning on starting this lobster roll food truck out in Los Angeles, for me, it was really based on the quality of the product, because I think the way that so many people handle lobster is actually incorrect. And Jim and Sabin did everything right. They spent a ton of time looking for a really good lobster supplier and then learning how to properly handle the product because it comes to us as prepared lobster meat. We're not distributing, 40,000 pounds of live lobster to
Right.
our franchisees who then have to prepare lobster meat on their food trucks. We're using prepared lobster meat and we're sourcing it from really high quality vendors from Maine and building those relationships, finding those strategic partnerships, making sure that our procurement strategy was really top notch and that we're finding an incredible specification on the product itself. All lobster is not created equal. The way in which you source your product, the certain specification that you're looking for, there is strategy in all of that. And Jim and Sabin really focused first and foremost on the quality of the product and making sure that the way that they then handled that product was to a T. And
Well,
that they were never
Annie,
orders.
but Annie, to your credit though, because they had an angel in you, because they were new to the industry,
Yeah.
and to what
Right.
extent was that having Annie, even though you were not working with them yet, having you there maybe as a go-to person to check things up with, to leverage your network, how much of that also played into their really?
We I did help them through that process. Jim, there's an annual seafood show. There's several annual seafood shows, trade shows around the world. One of them just happens to be in Boston at the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center every year. And you get together with 35 or 40,000 of your closest friends in the global seafood
Right.
business, and that whole convention hall is just full of seafood vendors from all around the world, from all around the United States and globally, and then processing and manufacturing equipment. So I took Jim with me to the Boston Seafood Show as they were developing the business that year, and we walked around the show and we met with different vendors, and but he was asking all of the questions about the product, and so I remember going to the show with my brother for the first time, and I was running late. He got there before I did. My shuttle was coming in late from my hotel, and he called me and he told me that he was there. And I said, "Don't go down the escalator." And I said, "You're going to get lost." And he was like, "It's a trade show. I'm not going to get lost." And he went down the escalator, and I was like, you're not prepared for what you're about to see, because as Mainers,
Yeah.
when you talk about the lobster business in Maine is huge. It's a big deal. It's a huge part of our economy. It's a big part of our culture, and it's a big part of our seafood industry. And when I take anybody, whether it's my brother or commercial fishermen or friends of mine, to the Boston Seafood Show for the first time, they are blown away, because you don't think of this industry as being a global industry.
Wow.
And it's massive. So you've got, pollock producers from Alaska, you've got, shrimp farmers from Ecuador, salmon producers from Scotland and Norway. It's incredible. It's an incredible display of the strength of the global seafood industry and all these different products that are available in the marketplace. And Jim went down onto the show floor and he was like, called me back and he was like, "I'm lost." Because it's very overwhelming. I mean, if
Right.
you've never been to a huge trade show like this, and many people haven't, it is a massive experience. And so we walked the show together. I introduced him to a number of different lobster vendors. And the other thing that we did was we talked a lot about properly pricing the product, because there's a perception on price for lobster, as there is for any other quality or luxury good. If you price it too high, there's going to be resistance in the marketplace. If you price it too low, people are going to think that there's something wrong with it.
Right.
And so, there's Jim and Sabin wrote a book several years ago, and he tells both of these stories about going to the Boston Seafood Show with me for the first time, and also their initial pricing of their lobster rolls, and that they did not price their lobster rolls correctly. And I had warned him, make sure that you price this thing accordingly. People are out, you're in Los Angeles, people are unaccustomed to this product. They know that lobster is a luxury item, and they want to know that what they're getting is quality, and they are expecting to pay a certain price for that item. You can't price it too high because there will be resistance. You can't price it too low because they're not going to want it. They're going to think that there's something wrong. And so pricing sensitivity is something that we always think about. You always have to maintain your margin to make sure that you're, not giving away the item, and you're building in your, your costs and your labor and everything else. But you also have to make sure that you're pricing things correctly.
Yeah.
And that's true for lobster rolls or any food commodity, any food item.
Well, it's fascinating, and it's really great to hear. A lot of what you're saying, Annie, revolves around what we talk a lot about here, which is really understanding your service delivery system and unit economics, for your venture before you scale. And it sounds like you guys in the team put a lot of work in to really understand what that would look like before you franchise. So let's take a little bit on the franchise piece. Since technically, and correct me if I'm wrong, you really can't control as franchisor the pricing set by a franchisee. How has that process been to help educate them on the point you just talked about, which is, the dynamics that you're in a Nashville versus a Boston?
This is a really dynamic, the price on lobster really is dynamic. And that's true not just for us, but for everybody that handles this product. And it's true for seafood in general. There's no futures in seafood that you would see in other commodities. It's very different than dealing with terrestrial protein like, pork or beef or poultry. We're harvesting either wild capture out of the ocean or for us, for the lobster industry, everything is wild capture. But for other seafood commodities, you're constantly battling with Mother Nature, either on production or distribution or fishing or whatever it is. So for the lobster industry and for us with our franchisees, we talk with them about pricing to them, and then they're responsible for making decisions on pricing their lobster items and their other seafood items, every item on their menu, for their specific market. And they understand that sensitivity that consumers experience as well. And during the pandemic, both the cost of goods of lobster, the price went up very rapidly in 2021. And so our franchisees, we had to educate our franchisees on why that pricing situation was what it was, what the market condition was for lobster. The price for many other food commodities went up exponentially in 2021 as people emerged from the pandemic and were out and were celebrating with their friends and family after not seeing each other for a long time. And they were treating themselves with items like lobster rolls or tuna or steak or whatever it was, definitely higher priced protein items. And so we then had to educate our franchisees on not only the pricing that they were receiving and why, but also how to make good decisions on pricing to their guests. And it is delicate. It's a delicate balance. I mean, you're talking about food. It's a personal experience. It's and people definitely are sensitive to pricing for all items. And we know that eating a lobster roll is a choice. That is not a necessity. And we just want to deliver a good quality product and a good quality experience to everybody all across the country. And working with our franchisees to make sure that happens is pretty critical.
So, Annie, let's talk marketing for a bit. Now, you joined Cousins Lobster, Maine Lobster, a couple of years ago. Could you tell us the before and after? Before you joined them, how were they doing their marketing, not just to support the corporate trucks and also the franchisees? And then you came in. What did you bring in, and what has been the result of that?
I think one of the things that I brought to the team is a very deep connection to the lobster industry here in Maine. Having worked in this industry for a number of years, this is a product. I mean, you talk about what is your purpose, what is your passion. This industry is my passion, and it is not only my job, it is my entire lifestyle. My friends all work in this industry. This is how I socialize. This is, it is, I think about what happens on the water in our rural fishing communities every single day of my life. I know that Cousins Maine Lobster is a huge part of the economy, even though we've got franchisees that are in, Oklahoma City, we've got corporate units in Los Angeles, we've got, operations throughout Texas and Florida. That the product that comes out of the coast of Maine, the product that's harvested from our rural islands and our coastal communities in Maine, very often doesn't stay here. It goes all around the country and all around the world. And so having a strong value chain, a strong supply chain, and a good story that refers back to this industry that is the foundation of our company at Cousins Maine Lobster, that's very important for me, and it's very important for our brand. And I think that by me coming into Cousins Maine Lobster, and I'm not saying this to toot my horn, but it's because I'm so passionate about this industry, and because we also have the connections that we do with our suppliers and with the fishermen that we work with, with the wharves that support our suppliers. I think about this in a really, really deep way because I've lived it. I've lived in a lot of these fishing towns. And I've been on the production side of the industry, and I just really appreciate every single person that's involved in the full value chain. And I recognize that we wouldn't be able to do any of this work if it wasn't for all of the people that are fishing, that are driving trucks, that are standing on the floor of packing facilities, and are doing the work to make sure that we get the high quality product that we need to distribute to our franchisees all around the country and provide incredible experience for our guests.
And how do you tell this story? Yeah. How do you now sort of capture?
Telling that story is really important for us. And so we are, we've spent a lot of time developing assets for social media, and, really working on communicating that for our consumers, because people love this mystique around fishing. You can see farms. You don't see fishing unless you're actually out on the water with a commercial fisherman. And in Maine, there really are a number of unique opportunities to take tours, to go out lobstering, to haul lobster traps. We make all of our franchisees, and they want to do this, but all of our franchisees come to Maine and go lobster fishing. They see the live lobster distribution. They see the prepared lobster process. And it's an incredible experience. We want to educate them in all of this because no matter what market they're in across the country, they are going to get people who are from New England who go up to their food trucks and talk about, or aren't even from New England, but had an experience eating lobster in Maine. They went to summer camp in Maine 40 years ago, and the last time that I had lobster was when I was at summer camp, and I went down into this little lobster shack with my family, and it was parents' weekend, and they want to tell this story, and we're part of that experience for them, and it's amazing. So we make sure that all of our franchisees are educated in Maine, in the industry. They're never pretending to be somebody that they're not. They're not lobster fishermen, but we want them to know what it feels like to be out on a boat and to go lobstering, to see a trap break through the water and come across the boat, and you filter through, you throw back the undersized lobsters because they're not at maturity. You throw back the oversized lobsters because they're going to be your brood stock. They learn about the things that have kept this fishery sustainable for hundreds of years, and they're able to pass that knowledge on to their staff and onto their guests.
One of the things
that a lot of value.
Thank you. One of the things that I think Sabin or Jim told us was this innovation that came from one of your franchisees about having this giant screen. You talk about education, educate in situ, right there inside the truck. Are there other things like in the marketing realm that were ideas from locals, your local franchisees, bringing it in, and then you assessing those ideas and say, okay, let's go with this one, maybe let's try, let's experiment. How much of back and forth goes on in your job?
That's a great question. Our franchisees are, the great thing for us right now is that our franchise group is still really small.
Right.
And even as we grow, we want to instill that back and forth conversation between our franchisees and our corporate system, and also within our franchise network, because the franchisees learn from each other. So one of our franchisees, who's based in Charlotte, North Carolina, Charlotte gets really quiet in the first quarter of the year. January, February are very, very quiet months in that market. So he decided several years ago to take his truck on tour. So he did an out-of-territory request. So we award territories with our franchise agreements to our franchisees. So they get a series of counties, but they can make an out-of-territory request and go and travel around, and they can do that either to try and spice things up with their guests, introduce new guests to the product, or to try and test new market. And so he decided to go and try this several day tour. We now have other franchisees that are doing these similar tours. So while he started it in his market, we had a group in Texas that did the same thing this year for the first time, and really learned from that networking opportunity between the two of them to figure out how to logistically make that happen, how to promote it well. So it's not just the franchisee to the franchisor relationship, it's the franchisee relationship that is really critical for the success of our system. And we encourage that.
That's great. I love it. And it really points to the power of the network, within franchising. One thing I'd love to get your take on, Annie, for our guests who are maybe thinking about embarking on a career in franchising as a franchisee or as a franchisor, and I'd love to hear your take on some misconceptions maybe about franchising or myths or becoming a franchisee. What do you think of that?
I think one of the greatest things about the franchise business is that you get to be completely entrepreneurial. You have to be an entrepreneur, but you have this incredible support system by virtue of buying into an existing brand. So we have so many people that come to us and say, I thought about doing this on my own, but I looked at the success of your brand and I thought, why would I do this by myself? Why would I recreate the wheel when I could invest in something where I'm going to be supported, where I have assets, where I have people that support me, where I can learn from somebody else. I don't have to do this all by myself. We invest so much in our franchisees from a training perspective, both in operations, in marketing, in continuing education, in the franchisee to franchisee network. It's that collaborative entrepreneurial experience that I think is really special. I think that being a small business owner can feel very lonely to people at times. And the great thing about being in franchise is that there's a support system, that you're not out there on an island all by yourself. You are supported by your franchisor and by your peers, or at least that's the way it is with us. I don't know if that's true for every franchise brand, but that's something that we really have made a conscious decision to create and hone and support for our franchisees. So you get to be an independent operator in your market, but you're completely supported by a bigger system. And it really, we talk about family first. I'm sure Jim and Sabin talked about this a lot. It really is that family approach that we're not healthy as a franchisor if our franchisees are not healthy. Much like a family, that the greater good is really important. And so we really do look at it that way, that there is a big picture approach to the way that we operate our business.
Wow. Annie, let's talk anthropology.
Okay.
So tell us, you study anthropology and then you are doing all of these. Are you crazy?
I think the thing that actually felt crazier to a lot of people in my life and in my career was when I started working in the lobster business. Everybody just assumed that the University of Maine has this incredible marine science program, marine policy program. So I had so many people that assumed that I went to the University of Maine. And when I said to people no, I studied anthropology and photography at Connecticut College, and I spent a semester in South Africa. When I say that to people, they're like, "What? Why? How did you end up in Maine? You've spent time in rural communities in the Eastern Cape and you speak Xhosa. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's interesting. So when I again, like, this is one of those things, like, you don't really think about it when you're going through it, but having lived in a lot of rural places around the world and having been able to travel to a lot of rural places, I've also been very lucky. I've been very lucky to spend some time in the Middle East and rural communities and in Palestine and Jordan, and what you experience in rural communities, there's a lot of similarities across the world. It's they're largely natural resource dependent. They tend to be overlooked by either their federal or their provincial government. They don't have as many resources as bigger cities and towns. Education is not as robust as it tends to be in bigger cities. There are infrastructure issues, there are healthcare issues, and so when I've lived in rural communities in Maine, it is not so dissimilar from experiences that I've seen in South Africa. Is it more extreme in being in, like, I lived in South Africa 7 years after apartheid ended, and being in rural communities in the Eastern Cape, which is the area, that's the province that Nelson Mandela is from. There, I mean, the village that I stayed in the Eastern Cape had no electricity and no running water, and was, connected by a horrible dirt road, but that you would ride in the back of a truck to before you got to the nearest town for 45 minutes. You'd be in the back of this truck on a dirt road. So, is Down East Maine that disconnected? No, but there are a lot of the similar themes in the systems that exist around rural communities. And so anthropology, above and beyond everything else, is really the study of systems. It's the study of social and cultural systems. And so I take that experience of studying systems and understanding the way that people interact with each other and the way that culture and society interacts, and you can apply those same exact concepts to marketing or to franchise or to sales or whatever, or to technology. Those themes are very consistent, and the way in which things work or don't work, and how you solve problems and how you get around challenges and figure out what the opportunities are. I think about my anthropology training a lot when I think about business on a regular basis.
Amazing.
Okay, so it really is strategic. All of this is strategic. I really believe it is. That's great stuff, and it's interesting how that relates maybe to how you're going to scale the franchise system. And let's talk about that right now, Annie. I think you guys, and you showcase how important it is to be authentic leaders and have a culture as a franchisor and a purpose and impact. As head of marketing, but also franchise sales, can you talk a little bit about franchisee selection and how maybe that's changed, or how you look at it going forward to ensure that your brand is represented the right way and your franchisees exhibit, if you feel they need to, the same passion and culture that you all represent?
Yeah, it's a lot harder than I think a lot of people think.
How
I mean,
so?
we're a smaller brand, and compared to, like some of the brands that you'd see in Inspire or Yum Brands, we don't have a lot of the big, like, franchise family groups that are part of our system. We have not done a lot of big multi-unit or area development deals. All of our franchisees to date have started as new franchisees with one single unit. And so we're in a slightly different position than somebody that you'd talk to at, like Taco Bell or McDonald's or Subway. But our franchise selection process has been completely organic to date. Our franchisees have come to us. We've been very lucky because we do have the added benefit of having been on Shark Tank, and when a Shark Tank episode re-airs, we do get a number of inbound inquiries to our website and through our franchise channel, of people looking to learn more about franchise opportunity with us, or they see the truck in their market, or whatever it is that drew them to write in to us. But finding that right person in that right market is very challenging. And we do need to be strategic about the territories that we're looking at developing and awarding for our franchisees, we have to be. And so we really do think very intently on, why is this market correct? Not only because this person is telling us that the market would be good for Cousins Maine Lobster, but what is the research that we need to do to decide, does it make sense for our system?
Right.
Because we spend a lot of time doing training and compliance and making sure that, we can efficiently still run our corporate team and support the franchisees and do all of the
Right.
things that we need to do to make sure that they are healthy in their business and their operations. So that selection for franchisees for franchise market is really, really challenging.
Right.
We want franchisees to come to us and know that they're going to be really good operators, really sound business people. And we also want them to be fun, because this business should be fun. Like, lobster is an incredible experience. You're delivering a really joyful product to people. They have a very visceral connection to their last lobster experience. And so we want to continue to give them a really good lobster experience, even if they're not in Maine. Give them that Maine experience in whatever market they're in across the country. And so it should be fun, and we want to have fun with the franchisees. Yes, it's hard work, but at the end of the day, we want to have fun with the people that we're working with. That's a huge goal of ours.
Well, Annie, this is awesome. I know I was just when I was hearing you speak about the time you spent in rural communities in different parts of the world, and I see that as actually most of your schooling was not just what you did in in Connecticut. It was actually a lot of schooling. I mean, schooling yourself as to the local realities, and then that global perspective, global mindset, bringing that to bear on what you do today. Let's piggy back on that and talk about how you and Zabin and of course Jim are using what you do now to promote social positive things in the local communities where you work, and also when you're selecting franchisees, ensuring that people have opportunities, that you spread the opportunities, and you're able to sort of see a lot of diversity. I mean, when you start talking about all the places you've been to, it's so diverse, and I'm sure here in your mind, also in your heart, the diversity is huge. So how is that playing into what you do today?
Yeah, we have a very diverse franchise network, and we're in a very diverse series of communities and cities across the country. We've got a franchise in Detroit. They're actually headquartered in Dearborn, which is one of the largest Muslim populations in the country, and it's been an incredible market for us.
Wow.
And we're in a lot of really diverse communities, and our franchisees are very racially, ethnically, like socio-politically very diverse, and we encourage all of that. Like, everybody is welcome at our table, and I think that's part of our strength, is being able to offer that diversity, and support it, and really encourage people to do whatever makes them feel good in supporting people in their own communities. And again, I think that's another strength of the franchise system, is that so many of the franchisees are really active in their communities and giving back at various events, supporting hospitals, supporting first responders, whatever it is that makes sense for them. They make those decisions on how to invest back in their community and support community, kids sporting events, whatever it is. There's tons of opportunity to engage. And I do think that you're right. I mean, I've been very lucky. One of the women that I worked for early on in my career always used to say, you have to start where people are. And I think about that a lot in marketing, in that, people want to see themselves reflected in whatever it is. So, like, the brand needs to look like the people that are our guests. And so our content that we create, we we do photo shoots at every single one of our grand openings, not only to celebrate our franchisees, but to also give them a host of assets that they can use on their social media that's reflective of their own market. We also do our own generic promotion, that we shoot ourselves, but our franchisees should be able to have assets that look like, their customers in Columbus, Ohio, or Oklahoma City, or, Austin, Texas. Because I'll tell you, Boston, Massachusetts in the middle of February looks very different than Los Angeles in the middle of February.
Right.
And so creating assets that are reflective of where people are is really important for us.
Wow, this is cool.
Great stuff. Well, I have a feeling that Cousins Maine Lobster is going to continue to grow and scale. And we have talked to, and I'm sure there's some brands and entrepreneurs out there that are early stage concepts, maybe a franchise or not. Can you talk a little bit, Annie, about where you are today and some of the challenges and trade-offs you have to make to scale, and how you look at those decisions as a company, and maybe any advice you have for brands that are struggling to balance executing and onboarding franchisees, but scaling as well.
It's the onboarding process is really it's really important, and it's really challenging. And I think for us, after we started franchising the food trucks in 2014, and we've learned a lot through that process. Jim and Sabin always say that this business has been a crash course in an MBA.
Yeah.
And I think they're right. But we're very, very intent on our training process and making sure that the franchisees feel like they are ready to hit the ground running the second that they open. And we support them through their entire onboarding process, and we support them through their grand opening experience. And I think that sets them up for success. It doesn't, the last thing that we want is for them to go out for their first day of service and not feel confident in the preparation of every single one of the items, that they don't have the truck properly stocked, that their team is not, ready for game day. So the investment that we make in our training for our franchisees is really, really critical for us. I think that it's a challenging time to be in franchise in the United States right now. There are a lot of things that are happening from a policy perspective that is really that's really kind of scary for us that are in the franchise space, and that's true at the federal level as well as within individual states.
Talk about a few of those issues.
We're
or
very
challenges.
lucky that we, I've mentioned trade associations a couple of times. I used to run one. I met Ab at the International Franchise Association conference this year, and I think that using the support and the guidance of trade associations for whatever industry you're in is really important.
Great
because point. There are so many different issues that are flying around. We're also a member of our seafood association on a national scale. That's really a great way to protect your business and your strategy, because if the policies are not in line with the businesses that are trying to develop and expand and grow, then you're going to have a really hard time. And being an active constituent is really important, not only within this industry, but I think in general. I think that, we've kind of gotten away from teaching civics in the United States, which feels unfortunate to me as somebody who has always been really focused on policy and trying to do the right thing, both for people and for business. And I think that that's important to balance those things. But having good civic engagement to know how to have a conversation with people when you're dealing with something that's challenging, and how to advocate for yourself, for your industry, for your community. I think those are all very important things, and I'm lucky that I got that education and experience at a young age. It has certainly served me well as I've gotten older and going through business. But knowing what the issues are for whatever your business is, whether it's franchise or it's lobster or it's food trucks, knowing those policies are going to make or break you. If you don't know them, you're going to be caught by surprise when something happens. And you have to stay engaged, and you have to know, how to interact and how to do it with civility and with respect, and be polite and figure out how to negotiate and be strategic. Because if you don't, then you're going to be set up for failure.
Yeah.
Wow.
And great advice for the potential franchisees out there to look for that, Vinny, and in your franchisor, right? Are they thinking ahead, being strategic, and kind of having your back and giving you access to those resources that you mentioned, Andy?
I think also, for your it's I've been thinking about this like podcast as as we were setting it up. I think for the students that are part of your institute and
Right.
that are part of the business experience at Babson, there are so many different ways that you can interact in business. It's not, I think that students tend to think on like, sales, marketing, communication, but there are so many different aspects of business. Like, government relations,
Right.
community development, outreach. Like, there are so many different ways that even if your passion isn't necessarily something that you would automatically think is something that you could infuse into the private sector, there is always need for those skills and those interests in the private sector, whether it's franchise or it's other independent businesses. There's always so much opportunity. Even if you're not necessarily thinking like, I want to do sales, not everybody has to do sales, and there isn't room for an entire team to be filled with salespeople. You need everybody else on the team as well to be able to contribute all of the different aspects that are important for running a functional business.
Wow. Annie.
All about the team. Vinny, take us home.
The A in your Annie not only stands for atomo. You know what atomo is, right? Huh? You are unique in many ways. You're an atom by all standards. What the world has taught you, Annie, if you look back your experience as a global citizen, what is your biggest takeaway that you think, hey, for the people that are growing up now today, the young, the youth, that they should also aspire to know at some point in their life? What would that thing be?
You have to travel. You have to go. You've got to go meet people. You have to go experience new things, experience new cultures, new foods, see how people live in other places. And it's going to make you learn more about being an American and being from America. Like you learn so much more about this place by leaving this place, because you see how people understand America and understand Americans, but you also can learn about your own experience by having a completely different experience, doing something completely different in another part of the world.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I've been very lucky.
Yeah.
I've been very lucky to travel and have the experiences that I've had.
Well, we'll end on that, and we're very, very lucky and grateful here, Annie. One of the beauties and benefits of sitting in this seat is learning too, and then being a conduit for sharing some of those amazing, not only entrepreneurial experiences, but life experiences and lessons. So we appreciate you, thank you, and look forward to continued growth of our relationship, Babson and Cousins, and I can see some case studies and having you on campus and really growing it. And while you're talking, and I was trying to focus on listening, in my mind came up my most recent lobster experience in Maine last summer. So I love that authentic connection with your consumers. So on that, well, thank you so much, Annie. Have a great rest of the day and best wishes.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you, Annie.
Thanks, Annie.
Maybe, by the way, the conference or maybe the trade show, is it taking place this summer again?
The seafood trade show?
Yeah, the one you talked about.
It's in March every year.
Oh, in March every year. So it'll be next year. Okay.
Yeah.
The one that Jim got lost.
If you want to go sometime, just let me know.
We will.
Okay, no, I will. You motivated me. I want to learn. I want to go out there, maybe even with a couple of students, or maybe with my family, to my kids, to go see.
But we'll stay at the top of the escalator until you're there.
But we will not go down until you come.
Okay.
So we don't get lost.
I don't want you to get lost.
Great stuff. Thanks, Annie.
Thank you guys.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Stars of Franchising.
Stars of Franchising was produced at Babson College, engineered by Travis Gray. Karen Soa is our guest coordinator, and music by Ralph Taylor.
If you like Stars of Franchising, Be sure to review us wherever you get your podcasts and spread the word and share these stories any way you can.